Getting good at anything that's worth getting good at is a long and usually frustrating process. For the lucky ones of us, the process unfolds passively over a fairly long period of time because the person just might not really care all that much, but might have a knack for whatever it is they're doing. In my case, for instance, I'm a decent writer, but I've never really set out on a targeted quest to become a better writer, and you can probably tell that from my scripting. Music, on the other hand, I labor tirelessly over, and so the process of becoming a better musician is painful to the degree that I care about it. So why is getting good so painful? Because it's a lot of time spent having to maintain a tenuous sense of faith that one day you'll get to where you're going, even if your path there is entirely unclear. Being good at something is the same as saying you have a high degree of control over desired outcomes, which seems straightforward enough at first, but the inevitable difficulty here is knowing what to control. In other words, what concepts and variables are at play that our desired skill requires us to be aware of and to master in order to achieve that fine-tuned degree of control. Like with most things, when you start out, you see fairly rapid improvement because a lot of what you learn and observe consists of pretty basic concepts that are both obvious and concrete. As you get better, you start to notice things going on under the hood you didn't really notice before, and things start to become progressively more abstract. In any given match, there is an almost endless amount of information being thrown at you, and it's up to you, the person playing the match, to make meaning out of that constant stream of information because you have limited mental resources and you can't process literally everything that's happening. For example, consider a Ganon full hop naring a Fox's shield. As a beginner, you might see this, and the most meaning you can pull from it is that Ganon is just attacking the other person. As an intermediate player, you might be able to parse the interaction a little more abstractly and see it as the Ganon spacing nair on shield specifically. Deeper still, a higher level player might recognize that Ganon's spacing nair on shield specifically at a steep angle of entry rather than just short hop nairing to high profile Fox. This could go as deep as you like, and the interpretations of what's happening could be as numerous as the people interpreting them. Now, my analysis and understanding of that interaction might seem obvious, but that's because I already framed the situation so it seems less abstract, or rather, I isolated that one interaction as meaningfully distinct from the rest of the set. Point being, the road to getting better is about how we interpret and frame information. For a personal example, one way I frame information is by categorizing how my opponents approach in 3 or 4 ways. This is a completely arbitrary way of thinking, but it embodies concepts and information that give me tight control of the match. The kicker here is I don't actually know if this is the optimal way of thinking about the information I get in a match. There may yet be things I don't see going on, or other more useful things I could be devoting my attention to, and that's where the difficulty lies. Improving past a certain point is arduous and tedious because it takes faith. You spend a lot of time unsure if you'll find the right path. In other words, if I wanted to improve from where I am now, where do I go? I truthfully have no idea. No one does when they hit these walls. As I always say, most of the time finding the right question to ask is a lot harder than answering that question. That's why everyone's motivation to improve crests dramatically when they feel like they've identified a problem area or some concept that gives them greater control over the game. And it's hard to be motivated when you hit these walls, and that lack of motivation is compounded still by the fact that your results may not necessarily reflect your perceived understanding of the game. You may feel like you understand the game at a very deep level, and for that reason you might not understand and are probably frustrated by the fact that that understanding isn't necessarily translating to the results that you want. But it's not so much about understanding as it is finding new and different ways to frame information so that it's actionable and effective for you. So in that sense, it's not how much you pay attention to, it's what you pay attention to. You have to keep looking for new ways to view the game and parse concepts into smaller sub-concepts, like differentiating different categories of approach rather than just lumping them all together as approaching. And this takes a repeated cycle of noticing things, coming up with new theories and ideas about those things, and experimenting with them until you have those breakthroughs. One of my biggest conceptual breakthroughs came towards the end of Smash 4's lifespan, and it was categorizing approach styles like I just talked about. This led to a dramatic diversion in my traditional gameplay, which was based largely on hard reads, to using my opponent's neutral tools against them by putting hitboxes where I knew they'd throw out their neutral tool well before they were actually there. Other Ganons and other players frame information and parse concepts differently than me. That's why we all play differently and get different results. Your playstyle is a complex interaction of different lines you draw around and between interactions based on what concepts you understand and recognize and what bits of information you explicitly look out for. And for that reason, there's never an obvious or easy way to improve, because improvement at late stages of skill development has mostly to do with finding better ways to mentally model the game, and that's a very abstract task. And there's a parallel to this for me in music as well. For those of you guys who've listened to my music, it's probably not terribly surprising that I've studied composers like Nobuo Uematsu religiously over the course of the past decade, and to this day, I still revisit my favorite game tunes and always find something going on that I didn't realize before, because I have a new appreciation of new concepts and a new way of looking at the music. Keeping this grind up takes that faith, because for all intents and purposes, there really is no way to know ahead of time what problems you'll face or what the best way to proceed is going to be, and getting better isn't always a question of being able to look at any given interaction and see what's going on, but how effectively the information you choose to frame and act upon allows you to control the match. Now, I want to be careful to stress that this isn't just about mincing concepts down to microscopic detail, to a point where the concepts and framing of information becomes useless and you can't really keep track of them in a match, like treating, I don't know, a full hop wolf nair at a 45-degree angle differently than a wolf nair at a 48-degree angle. Rather, it's about, as I've said before, the perspective you take, and not how much you pay attention to, but again, what you pay attention to and how well paying attention to that thing or set of things serves you. At that, speaking of abstract, I'm sure I've overloaded you with abstract information at this point, as I tend to do, so I think I'll give it a rest there and let that simmer for a while. It's been about 2 months now since my last video, so I'm glad to be talking to you guys again, but as many of you know, music is where most of my energy gets put now. And speaking of which, a few people asked me recently and in previous videos about where to download the music they've heard in my videos, so I'll put a link in the description. The download link on the site will say, misleadingly, buy digital track, but you don't actually have to buy it. You can just enter 0 to get it for free, which I'm completely fine with and encourage. At that, thank you guys as always. I hope I didn't just confuse you, and if I did, mail me your receipt and I'll knit you an apology sweater. I'll see you guys around.